The transcript came, I'm reading it, and I'm thinking to myself, I've never said anything like that. Where is it all coming from? When eventually I got the CDs, I'm listening, I said, what the hell she's talking about? There's nothing like that on the CDs.
This is very bad. My view would be that a lot of this is not at a level that it should be used as evidence.
These men have been locked up for 2.5 years. They'd been falsely accused of the gravest of crimes.
The Charlene Downes investigation was the biggest in Lancashire police history, and we finally had the evidence to bring the killers to justice.
On the face of it, and looking at all the transcripts, the case looked quite severe. I've been a criminal barrister since 1972. You try not to decide that your client is guilty as such, but certainly the evidence looked strong.
When I went up to give my evidence, I just glanced across. They didn't look at me, they just looked straight ahead.
Mohammed Ravesh, I didn't know him from Adam, but I had Abatiki. I used to see that creep in the nightclubs with all the young girls, and that. There was something about him I didn't like. He was a creep. But he kept winking at people in the jury. There were two people, a man and a woman in the jury, looking over, and that's why I was getting so high rate. And I was like, how do you know he doesn't know them?
I do believe that Iyad al-Batiki murdered Charlene, and Mohammed Raveshi assisted in her disposal.
Raveshi's been a dubious character, to put it politely, probably since he arrived in Britain. I think he's a dangerous man, and he's extremely clever and extremely manipulative.
I know nothing about Charlene Downes because I don't know her, never met her, and I know nothing about her family. Nothing at all. I have very strong suspicion that Mr. Don Fraser is behind it all. Being a police officer and abusing his power, he had a major role to play in this, to bring in me into the situation.
I've lived where I live, in Blackpool, since 1980. In 1988, he turned up from London and bought the house next door but one. Single man, he looked unlike everybody else on the street. He was from the Middle East. One or two of our near neighbours weren't too pleased to see one of his race come onto the street. I'll be frank, they said, how do I feel about having one of them move in? But I stayed social, not social, cordial with Raveshi.
Don Fraser, he must be a racist man because I've done nothing to him for him to behave like he did at the time. And he did many things about me to create my life almost impossible. He is behind most of my trouble from the day I set my foot in Blackpool. I went to his house a few times that he wasn't home, and his wife, she was talking at some stage to me about their personal relationship, the fact that Don is always working. She told me that her husband cannot get it up, and I got the impression that she is coming on to me. I decided that no, that is she's becoming a bit too friendly, so I didn't go around. I don't know what she told him, but he became my worst enemy.
Raveshi told us that the reason why you didn't like him is because something happened between him and your wife. And your wife.
Well, if Raveshi is saying that that there was any kind of romantic, my wife didn't like the guy pretty much from the word go. So it's just laughable. I mean, Raveshi is just incapable of telling the truth. And I know he's a brilliant liar. I mean, some of his performances would put Jimmy Savile to shame. I know that he's got a bee in his bonnet about my activities and my motivation in trying to get him convicted, but it's just ludicrous. Most paedophiles are sly, secretive, organised in their disgusting ways. What we did find in the investigation, several girls came forward saying how uneasy they'd felt when they were in his company. He'd made them all feel queasy.
All of the investigators were disgusted by the information that was coming into the inquiry. I had a young daughter of the same age as when Charlene went missing, so, you know, to me, it was sickening. I do believe that Mohammed Raveshi had a very unhealthy interest in young white females. He was certainly the brains of the partnership, smug, arrogant, self-assured, dickhead. And similarly, he had Albertiki, very much the same too.
I had a drink in the pub and then a couple of drinks on the coach. Bouncer thought I was drunk, so I went across the road to a kebab shop for a coffee. And then the next thing, I know it was early hours. I woke up and I was naked in a bed. No idea where I was. I don't know how I got up the stairs. I don't know how I got in the room. I don't know how I got in the bed. There must have been something in my drink because I don't remember anything. The police told me that I had Albertiki rape me. They told me that there were cameras in the house and that they'd seen everything. Don Fraser and Jan Besson interviewed me a lot on a lot of different occasions. They told me he'd killed Charlene Downes and that they were going to get him because of me. That was how they were going to do it. They told me that that was what it was for.
Did you tell that Eddie Albertiki was a murder suspect in the Charlene Downes case?
No, because it was top secret when she got raped. It was 6 months before that became public news. There's no way any police officer would have told anybody that in 2005 when the girl got raped.
Just so you know, it would have been illegal for the police to give you any information about Albertiki as a murder suspect.
They told me who he was, what he'd done. They told me they'd been following him for months. They told me I was lucky to be alive. And they said that I could get him for Charlene, for the child that he'd killed. And he'd cut up and he'd sold in Kebab Meat. So that was then on me. And that, to be fair, at the time, that got me through.
One of the things that we have to sort of put to you is that there was a suggestion that you led to say things that weren't true.
If it's going to be suggested that the police somehow influenced to make a complaint, I completely refute that.
Don Fraser phoned me numerous times. Jan Besson phoned me as well. It was one of them that said they'd got audio for the tape. I was told that it wasn't a very strong case because I was making gratification noises that could be heard. They told me to say, maybe you made these noises because you thought it was your boyfriend, and that unless I said I thought it was my boyfriend, the case would fall apart. And I said, I can't say that because I don't remember any of it, because I wasn't compos mentis. I wasn't willing to put my name to something that wasn't true.
Did you actually speak to...
No.
So are you saying you didn't actually speak to...
No, not that I can remember.
Have you actually met Jan Besson?
Yeah.
She said she doesn't remember speaking to you.
She took me out for coffee in Preston.
She said she has no memory of you.
Yeah, well, that's not true. I don't know why she'd say that. She phoned me a lot on the phone to tell me everything was going to be all right because I was in such a mess. And in Preston, she took me out for coffee after we were in court. She was in court with me, counselling. And she doesn't remember me. I'm not bothered because I want to forget it all myself anyway, but she's lying. The law, as I believe, if you've done something wrong, the police are there to fix that. You get found guilty and you go to prison. But the police didn't fix anything, they made it worse. Because they've left me with nothing. And all these unanswered questions and pieces of a puzzle that never have ever fit. I've been used. I was used to catch a murderer, and they couldn't catch a murderer. They didn't want him for rape. So then he dropped me like a sack of potatoes. I wasn't needed. I was surplus to requirements. I was just a pawn in a game that they didn't win.
The police were desperately trying to get other evidence against both men in order to try and bolster up their case against them. This involved going around interviewing, making suggestions that certain things had happened without any evidence that they had.
Some of the witnesses were leaned on excessively by police investigating the Charlene Downes case, particularly Jan Besant. Her name comes up time and time again.
She spoke to people who knew Mr. Ravesci. She tried to persuade them that they should give evidence against Mr. Ravesci, that he was a very bad man who needed to be put away. And obviously, for a police officer to do that is nothing short of wholly dishonest.
Did you ever put pressure on people?
No, I don't really recall interviewing. Oh my goodness. That's a very unfair line of questioning.
The police were out to get him. They picked me up from school one day. It was absolutely horrible. I was just a kid, I was only 14. They questioned me for hours and hours. It was Jan Besant. She was shouting and screaming at me, "We know he's a pedo, tell us he's assaulted you or we'll lock you up." I remember Jan Besant slamming her hands on the table. She was really, really angry at that point. They said they would let me go if I told them he'd sexually assaulted me, but I just wasn't going to say something that wasn't true. I've known him since I was 9, and he was one of the most honest, helpful, good-hearted people I know. He wouldn't do anything like that. My mother couldn't look after me. She asked Rez to look after me when I was 11. To a lot of people, that sounded really dodgy, but my mum knew he was a good person. Rez taught me the value of work. He'd always be working, but he'd make time to help me with my schoolwork. He was always very supportive.
It is such a coincidence. Police coming for me for this Charlene Downes, and suddenly all sexual abuse comes up as well, whereas before no sign of anything like that. The police made their mind up that they want me. They were prepared to go to any extent to create something which is not there, turn me into evil person, basically.
Are you an evil person?
I am not evil, far from that. I am a hard-working person. The police knows that full well. They followed me. They saw me day and night what I do. So how could I be evil? Yeah?
When did you first realize that the police had suspicions that you were involved in the killing of Charlene Downes?
Can you see me properly, yeah? So my name is Rez Ravesci. This is my property. Yeah. So I'm just filming this one because the police has done some search for the past 6 days. So we're just going to keep this as evidence, you know. Could you please follow me?
It was about 7:30 or 8 in the morning. Suddenly police come in knocking on my door. hundreds of them, asking me, "You Raveshi?" I said yes, and we coming to search your house.
It seemed to me that he removed the carpet.
And then it was towards the end of that day that I found out what it was all about.
Nice laminated floor, which you can see, they ripped it all off.
According to police, the murder happened here, and Charlene Downes was sexually abused here.
So these are photographs taken of the inside of Mohammed Raveshi's house on Hornby Road. We recovered nothing by way of valuable DNA or other evidence to suggest that Charlene had been at that location. It was disappointing. But that said, we did then move on to insert covert recording equipment inside Raveshi's home address. Those recordings had been listened to live time in the 4-week process that the surveillance was in operation. And then a few days or so later, the recordings, there were maybe 52 of them, digital audio tapes, and they were all in a box. And I thought, I'm going to go and listen to these recordings and see what was on them.
The audibility of the recordings was really problematic. It was very, very poor, disturbingly so. Unfortunately, the specialist team placed at least one of the microphones close to a television, which really did hamper the clarity of what they recorded. But as poor as they were, Jan Besant volunteered to try and see if she could make out anything. She was keen to find out what had happened to Charlene Downes. She was very keen, as we all were. And she worked and worked and worked, and within weeks, she was hearing material which went into the court case. Without Jan Besant's transcripts, you don't have any evidence to charge these two, never mind convict them.
I listened to those tapes for 18 months. I knew them inside out. I was given expert status so that I could deliver the evidence at court on behalf of the prosecution to identify those key and incriminating conversations that implicated both Raveshi and Albertiki. This was probably one of the key conversations. Raveshi is clearly feeling the pressure and the stress of the investigation.
Yesterday morning, I thought maybe something is on. I'm going to check the photo of that. It's something there.
The transcript came, I'm reading it, and I'm thinking to myself, I've never said anything like that. Where is it all coming from? Initially, I thought maybe they tried to get somebody to sound like me to record it, but when eventually I got the CDs, I'm listening, I said, what the hell she's talking about? There's nothing like that on the CDs. I knew that this case was so corrupt, so obvious, that, eventually somebody would see. Obviously it's frightening at the time that you're going through it. Luckily, I'm a sort of person, very strong character. I would not sit back till the day I am actually outside. I would work as hard as ever. I was up to 2, 3 a.m. studying all these recordings, creating various charts. Every hour or so, the prison officers come and check, and they would say, Mr. Raveshi, get some sleep. I said, no, I am determined to get to the bottom of this case. Okay, these are the documents. It's 20 boxes of evidence. I was trying to go chart after chart, get into the bottom of this case to make it easier for me to explain to my solicitor.
We had consultations with him in Preston Prison during the course of the trial. It was one of those cases where, as we delved more into the evidence, more into his background, more into what had happened, the allegations that were made against him and what he was supposed to have said on tape simply didn't add up.
The transcription produced by D.S. Besant was potentially very misleading. It's extremely important that when recordings are being transcribed, that the person doing the task is objective, that they don't already have very strong views, or indeed any views at all, about how far that evidence is going to be used to support a case. In this instance, the police officer's transcripts showed several signs that she had been subject to confirmation bias, which is the technical term for being influenced by the events which she had investigated. The fact that D.S. Besant had been one of the main officers in the case, collecting the evidence, making arrests and doing interviewing, meant that she could not possibly produce transcripts in which confirmation bias was not going to be a factor. She would be affected by what her theories were as to the case. You're not going to be here burial place on this, actually. There's no way. Because I don't think it's there.
Yesterday morning, I thought maybe something is on.
It's not burial place. I think she's saying I go out and check as quick as I can. Or, you know, that's I put in brackets. Yeah, it's not burial place. I'm pretty sure it's not. Burial is 3 syllables. There are no 3 syllables there, even taking that guy's accent.
Yesterday morning, I thought maybe something is on.
I cannot hear anything but burial place.
Yeah, but you've been absolutely hearing that from everybody. It's a classic case of cognitive priming, where because everybody has been told that that's what these words are, that is what they're hearing. There's absolutely no phonetic or linguistic support for that interpretation. Yet I can't hear burial place in that at all.
This is the first time I will have heard this, or the content of these tapes in a long, long time. It's a blast from the past. I still believe they're saying what they said in the transcripts.
I really don't think that's what's being said. I'm hearing, I've put in brackets, I killed no one.
There's a sigh, and then, why do you think you killed her here? I was just angry, killing.
Now that, I think, may be clean. Why do you think she cleaned in here? Or why do you...
I feel that, you know, I can still make out what they're saying. It's still really Nothing that I would change.
If he hasn't had the machine,
Just telling the axe and now you have to die is in the background. They are discussing big bones. Whether we're talking about media that's in the background, whether there's a program talking about axes and dying, or whether they're talking about this case is something I can't answer. She hasn't transcribed any of the stuff that's going in the background. And it's not a full transcript, it's a summary of what she has decided. In fact, they're all summaries. It's edited evidence. It's been redacted, pre-redacted by Jan Besant.
When these tapes were first played in court, it was a horrific moment for the family. They were led to believe that they were listening to conversations about how their own daughter met a horrible death. And that leaves you stunned.
We had monitors in the court, and together with the conversation when it was played, there was a ticker tape that ran underneath it with the subtitles of what the transcript said.
the last one, the last big one, and then it was cut off to the 45 degrees.
And the stuff that came out in that court, I just couldn't believe it. The stuff that came out was just horrendous.
But it said on them tapes, and I just, oh, it's just, you wouldn't even put that in your worst, think in your worst nightmare. It's so barbaric. I just pulls on my heartstrings thinking what she must have gone through that night. She must have been so scared.
If he hasn't had the machine.
When the line about Charlene being cut up and put into kebab meat came out during the court case, tabloid news desks went crazy for it. They went absolutely mental for it. Overnight, it elevated her story from being a regional story to a national and an international story.
Jokes about chopping up her body and putting it into a kebab.
So all of a sudden, Karen Downes had people tapping on a door and tapping on a window. When you're a journalist on the Blackpool Gazette or the Sun or the Mirror, when you've got 200 or 300 words to explain a concept, you just quote what's being read out in court, saying these extreme things about this kid being raped, murdered, tortured, put through a mincing machine, and her bones being crushed up for tile grouting, and all this salacious stuff. And it reads as if these tapes have been played out clear as day, when it wasn't actually. It was somebody else's interpretation of some very fuzzy tapes.
When you heard stories about how Charlene was murdered, that she went into the kebabs, what was going through your head? What did you think of the transcript?
I've never heard anything from anybody's mouth, anything like that coming out. She went into the kebab. Where it came from? Who says that? There is no mention of anything like that. The only time that anything like that was mentioned was one day I said, I know who's behind it. This David Cassidy behind it. And said, you need to fucking kill him and put him in a kebab.
So I know who's doing it now. That guy called Dave. The fucking ugly, fat, short, fat.
I think I've seen him. Kill him, chop him up and dispose of him.
I did it again. I did it.
You got a kebab shop,
I know. That's it, yeah. Mix it with a fucking kebab.
Make some money for
I know, that's true, yeah.
There was no evidence that Mr. Raveshi had ever known Charlene Downes. There was no evidence to connect him with her in any way whatsoever. All they had was the hearsay evidence of David Cassidy.
David told the police that he had had a conversation with Albatiki's brother, Tariq, and that Tariq said that he knew that a young English girl had been murdered and Albatiki and Raveshi were involved.
Tarek gave me the full story of everything what happened. He came down in the morning and he said there was blood everywhere. Everywhere. He said to me, Charlene was in a freezer next to one of the takeaways.
David Cassidy, I said in court, he is the worst person can be a witness for anyone. I knew David Cassidy in 2003 when I bought a kebab shop. I used him for a few days to do delivery for me. A job that would take 5 minutes, it would take him half an hour, 40 minutes. I realized that he's not up to the job. So I phoned him, I left a message for him, Dave, we don't need you don't need to bother to come, yeah? He came to the shop, effing and blinding, he wants his wages. I said, what wages? Because you didn't deliver, you didn't work anything. And then from then on, he became even more bitter and started writing racist stuff on the back of my shop and reporting me that we handed in stolen stuff. Police come in, raiding my place, searching it for the stolen stuff. Nothing came out of any of that. We had a fight. I had to defend myself. So as it happened, you know, I beat him up, and then suddenly Charlene Downes situation came up, and then he's behind it. This is history of persecution witnesses. This is the charge sheet to do with David Cassidy and almost 4 pages of his conviction. I do not know. He's got so much, you know, that is his, you know, hobby, it seems to me, committing crime. That's what amazes me. Somebody like him that police know better than anyone else, they're basing the whole case on him. It is absolutely crazy. It's absolutely stupid. Police knows better than anyone else how bad this person is, how dishonest, how you know, dishonest he is. You cannot believe anything this man says. David Cassidy, the Mr. Fraser, he seemed to be all this bitter person suddenly becoming like a gang. You know, I don't understand how they come together. That is something that, you know, I'd like to know. How this story came about for them all get together, all these my worst enemies.
As time went on, there were more and more problems arising. The case obviously hinged upon 2 fundamental pillars, one being the flawed transcripts of many hours of secretly recorded conversations between the 2 suspects, and the other being hearsay evidence for David Cassidy.
Now, David Cassidy, the police wired him for sound and then told him to go and talk to Albertiki's brother again and make sure that he got responses along the same lines.
The counsel for the prosecution were told consistently that those tapes no longer existed. We made a written request to the police to say, look again into the question of these tapes. And sure enough, and much to everyone's amazement, the tapes came to light. And they drove a coach and horses through his account.
There were about 10 or 11 discs, as I recall, one of them having a really severe scratch from the centre to the periphery. The scratched one I brought to the attention of the Crown Prosecution Service, and the CPS, dutifully enough, invited the defence lawyers to go and listen. I didn't expect that they'd be able to hear anything. It was scratched. When the lawyer sat down and the expert produced his own machine and he played it, and I heard, as they did, and the lawyer for Raveshi literally punched the air.
You've told me things when you were mad with Eddie and Raz and that, but...
What is it?
You said to me that she was chopped up.
What means chopped up?
Cut up.
Who?
You, honestly, you did. Tarek, outside there.
You pissed me off. Imagine I coming to you and I say you told me I'm a pedophile. I never say it.
I must have got the wrong end of the stick.
Did your heart sink?
My heart sank. To say my heart sank is an understatement. I just couldn't believe what I was listening to.
Albatiki's brother completely denied that any such thing had happened to his knowledge, and indeed denied that he'd ever had a conversation with Cassidy along those lines.
What did you tell me out there?
When I was there, you dickhead, don't fucking put something I never fucking speak about it. You dickhead, you start to put the shit everywhere. No matter what happened, you want to blame us because you hate him.
It was horrifying. A huge investigation into the murder and disappearance of a 13-year-old girl had just gone, it vanished.
Today, the prosecution announced that it couldn't offer any evidence against Mohammed Rabeshi, who was charged with assisting an offender, and another man who was charged over Charlene's murder.
We must now accept that we don't have sufficient evidence to secure convictions in this case.
It was shameful. The cover-up, the lies being told about the whole thing. It had no basis. It has been proved today.
Justice for Charlie!
Oh God, that was terrible that day. To see them walk free. Oh, I could have literally have told him sorry, but I could. Sorry. It's the way I felt that day. We all did. It was horrible. I still believe they're guilty to this day. I think it's no more than a gifted act.
Albertiki and Rabeshi are guilty. Yes, they are. It goes without saying.
The EDL and the BNP, they seized on the popularity of grooming gangs, nationalism and xenophobia.
First of all, I would like to thank all of the EDL and Casuals United for making today possible. Charlene was let down by the police and CPS.
The English Defence League, the BNP, they were supporting us. They were going out demoing and supporting Charlene. I was just so grateful for any help that I could get.
The EDL Casuals are the police force for Charlene's justice.
My mum did marches for Charlene. We made T-shirts. I was giving out leaflets. It got the word out for Charlene.
Is that we will continue to return to Blackpool until this case is reopened.
To Blackpool, I will always be the one who murdered Charlene Downes. Whether you're innocent or not, it makes absolutely no difference. Many things I suffered since I came out. People beat me up. People punched me, people broke the bottom of my head, I went to hospital. I was being abused, calling racial things. We have threat of people could kill us. They cut a pig's head and they chucked it through my window. All the rumors they created around me, obviously people became encouraged to break into my house. They just destroyed my house, really. Everything that I had, it seemed to be disappeared. I had maybe 100 or maybe 50 photographs of myself, my family and things like that. They all disappeared. That is the only picture that I have with me. Not only did they destroy almost my future, they destroyed my past as well.
These men have been locked up for 2.5 years. They'd been falsely accused of the gravest of crimes. The police tried to manipulate the evidence in this case and tried to get them convicted in the face of what they knew to be facts and evidence that completely undermined the case that they were trying to present.
If one puts all the failures of the police together, there is scope there to suggest that there is more than incompetence to it, but I'm not prepared to say that. But certainly, to my mind, there was just one item of incompetence after another.
Did you know about these CDs in 2005?
I didn't know anything about these CDs in 2005.
But they've gone into the system in 2005.
That's what I'm told by the IPCC report, yeah. I don't know. I have no memory of it. Why would I have no memory of it?
So what do you think happened?
I haven't got a clue. I'm just utterly baffled by how all this has happened and why.
Somebody, using your account, has registered those CDs as irrelevant.
It could be the case that someone had access to my keyboard and it would have been a malicious act. They would know they're doing something wrong, could have accessed my keyboard and made stuff that I didn't know about irrelevant, therefore taking it away from my attention. It would never fall to my eyes. When the trial fell in 2008, that's when I found out the CDs never came into the incident room. I was told by a retired officer that he'd taken those CDs to Superintendent Buschini's office on the 4th floor at Blackpool Police Station and handed them to him, whereupon Mr. Buschini had allegedly said, "Give them to me, I'm going to lock them in my secure cabinet and nobody gets to know about their existence."
Do you believe that somebody withheld the CD?
Yes, I do. Had it been disclosed at that time, we wouldn't have had the authority to go and search Raveshi's house, nor to install intrusive surveillance. With the lack of progression, I think, that was being made with the investigation at that time, there was a lot of pressure to come up with results, and the rule book was very much bent at that time.
I'd be very, very surprised, having worked for Paul Buschini, if he would do anything which wouldn't be anything other than which is ethical to try and seek to achieve justice and present the best evidential case at court.
Who do you think killed Charlene Downes?
The only thing that I can think from what I know now, one needs to look very closely to family. The family members, and people who are related to the family, friends or relatives or whatever. That is, if I was police, that's where I would look at.
This is a police report from the 24th of the 11th, 2003.
3 weeks after she disappeared.
Yeah. The following information has been collated on the Downes family. With regards to the above report as follows. Myself and DC12 have been making inquiries into the activities of the above family, specifically the possible sexual abuse of the children by suspected and convicted sex offenders. It is thought that this abuse is occurring with the knowledge and the consent of the parents of the children involved.
Did you kill your daughter?
Did I what?